nuclear war. And how is that serious in the conflict in Ukraine, in your opinion?
Well, I'm going to be as serious as I am. I've said this on other podcasts. I'll say it here. I just hope that everybody in your audience knows, you yourself, are you married? I don't mean to ask personal questions, but I know you have kids.
Yeah.
You love your family?
No.
What'd you do this weekend? Did you take them out? Did you enjoy life? You know you almost died on Saturday. Do you know that? Are you aware of that? Or are you pretending it didn't happen? Because had Joe Biden signed off on the proposal that Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, brought in to greenlight the use of Storm Shadow cruise missiles and American ATACMS missiles against targets inside Russia, we'd all be dead, because it would have triggered a nuclear war. The Russians said, from Vladimir Putin to the ambassador to the United Nations to the Russian ambassador here in the United States, that this would be an act of war. In fact, the Russian ambassador at the United Nations, in session with the Security Council, said it will be a declaration of war. And I believe there was a back channel communication, because all of that wasn't resonating. There was a final back channel communication, the content of which I don't know, but I think I know. And I think they said, these are the targets we're going to hit. And the decision's been made. If you do this, this is automatic. You can't stop it. That's why Biden was so mad. Did you see him at his when he get ready to meet with Starmer? Because he was ready. They were ready. They had it all together. Starmer brought the big red box with all the documents. They were going to sign off on this thing because Russia's bluffing. Russia's bluffing. Russia's bluffing. Russia wasn't bluffing. And someone said, what do you think about Putin's thing? I don't give much mind to Putin. Look at that angry old man. You know why he was angry? Because he was humiliated by the Russians. But this isn't about humiliation. What it's about is that a man named Volodymyr Zelensky has put political pressure on the United States, Great Britain, and NATO to allow him to do something that everybody knows will has the potential of triggering a nuclear war. And they almost did it. They almost signed off on it. We almost all died this weekend. Do you understand that? I don't think people understand it. 72 minutes is all it takes from the initiation of the first action to the end of the world. 72 frickin' minutes. Whatever the hell you were doing this weekend, you wouldn't have gotten to do it. I went to a movie. You wouldn't have gotten to see the end of the movie. Took my kids for a walk. They ain't coming home. Took my dogs for a walk. You ain't coming home either. There would be no home. And if there is, the consequences of surviving the initial nuclear exchange are worse than dying in the initial nuclear exchange. Nikita Khrushchev said it. The survivors will envy the dead. I don't think everybody gets it. I don't think your audience gets it. I think they're just saying that, guys, we all almost died this weekend. It's the closest we came to nuclear war since the Cuban Missile Crisis. One stroke of the pen would have all been taken. They were getting ready to sign the frickin' documents. Biden was lined up with Starmer. They had the paperwork ready. And it's only because the Russians said, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. We're not bluffing. And thank God somebody close to Biden went, they ain't bluffing. They're not. And Biden made the right decision. But they're still going to talk about it. Now you're going to go up in the General Assembly and talk about it. Zelensky's going to come here and talk about it. How much longer are we going to allow this insane man in Kiev to hold the fate of the world in his hands? When are we going to take charge and say, oh, we don't want to die. I want to go to the movies. I want to walk the dogs. I want to play with my kids. I want to live. Because that's what this is about. This isn't stupid academic parlor games with, drunk people in the back room smoking cigars going, well, the Russians are bluffing. Well, historically speaking, blah, blah, blah. No, they're not bluffing. This is about America and Great Britain enabling Ukraine to attack Russian cities using weapons provided by the United States and Great Britain, using targets developed by the United States and Great Britain, inserted into the weapon systems by American and British hands. People need to understand, ATACMS can't be launched. It's a GPS-guided system, GPS and inertial guidance system. But if it's GPS, commercial GPS, like we all use, well, maybe Scott, I got a Garmin. Great. You got a single signal between you and the Garmin, and I can jam it anytime I want, and then you're stupid. You don't have anything. You have to use military-grade GPS. That's 2 signals. In order to make those signals work, they're encrypted. You have to be able to decrypt them. So there's a little device that gets plugged in there, and you have to load in the encryption. Only Americans and NATO get to do that. Part of a schedule published by the National Security Agency. So before each attack can be used to launch, to make sure that GPS doesn't get jammed, an American or NATO hand has to load up the encryption. That means that we're making this possible. That missile can't hit Russian territory without an American hand. The Russians are going, that means you're attacking us. Literally, it means you're attacking us. You're a party to the conflict. With the Storm Shadow, it's even more. It uses GPS, again, that whole encryption thing we just talked about. It uses an inertial navigation system, but it also uses something called terrain, basically terrain following, TERRACOM. And this is maps made by the United States, only the United States, of the terrain maps with all the features. We block that in, and then we have to program in more refined things. This is all done targeting. We have a targeting cell. There's a name for it, I forget it. But we have them in the Pacific, we have them in the Atlantic, we have them in the United States. The targeting cell is responsible for different parts of the world. And what it does is, if you want to hit a target, it will then do a couple things. It's going to pick the route that you need to fly to avoid terrain features. You don't want to run into buildings, pylons, mountains, etc. You're going to pick the route, but you're also going to overlay it, the intelligence, that where enemy air defense systems are. You're going to go around that. Only we have this. Only we're capable of putting it all together into a target package that we designed. The Ukrainians can say, this is the target we want to hit, but to hit that target, we have to build the target package. And then it gets sent encrypted, by the way. I know that's inconvenient, but it's sent encrypted on the ground to the people near the missile who aren't Ukrainians. They're not, because Ukrainians aren't allowed to be anywhere near this encryption. And then it gets loaded into this missile by these non-Ukrainian hands, probably hands that say made in Great Britain or made in America, because it's American targeting data, baby. We developed the target. And then it's loaded on and it's fired. To do a target like this, you need 24 to 48 hours minimum to plan. This isn't a spontaneous target. That means that the United States for 24 to 48 hours is planning a literal attack using a NATO weapon against Russian target. We're the parties to the conflict. And Vladimir Putin said, we know this. You say, well, how does he know it? Scott Ritter, you gave away national secrets. No, everything I just said is publicly. It's in the public domain. But the Russians have, just so you know, captured intact the ATACMS warhead to include the guidance. They found the port. They know what that port's for. It's where the targeting, the GPS encryption is put in, because they pulled out the chips and they were able to read it and they reverse engineer it and they got it all. They know everything. They captured intact the Storm Shadow. They know everything. They were able to reverse engineer it. They know this. So when Putin says, we know how this works, he's not guessing. He's not going off of open source intelligence. The Russians know this and confirmed it. He knows without a shadow of doubt that if that is used to hit a Russian target, an American or British hand touched it. It was planned in the United States, and he's not going to let that happen. We wouldn't let that happen. Imagine if Russia gave Mexico a bunch of missiles that Russia targeted, used Russian satellites, and gave it to the Mexicans, to the cartel or somebody, and said, hit Denver. And boom, Denver blows up. And Russia says, no, it was the Mexicans that did it. No, it wasn't. You did it. You gave them the weapon. You gave them the intelligence. You loaded it in. And you helped them fire it. We blame Russia. Well, that's what Russia just did. They blamed us. Rightfully so. You know, and Antonov made one of the final points, because the first thing is Putin said it. He said it on Thursday. That still wasn't good enough. Starmer showed up with the damn briefcase. They were going to sign these documents because they don't trust Putin. So the UN ambassador, the Russian ambassador, UN in session, said this will be a declaration of war. And they still went, he's bluffing. He's bluffing, man. That's just bluff. Anatoly Antonov. I saw him Friday night. I went to the Russian embassy on Friday night to attend a cultural event, a piano concert. Rimsky-Korsakov, and other Russian poets. Part of the ongoing effort of the Russian embassy to sort of show people the culture of Russia so that they say, well, maybe the Russians aren't just brutal savages. But he was sort of distracted, and I would say not on his diplomatic game. Why? Because he had to give an interview prior to this on instructions from his government to tell the United States that if they sign off on this, remember, he's the Russian ambassador. He's responsible for the Russians in the United States, that Russia will attack the United States. Russia will attack the United States. That's the message he sent. Russia will attack the United States. And now you're the Russian ambassador at a cultural event going, I hope those bastards heard what I said. Because if they didn't, this all ends. I mean, and that didn't work. They still think he's bluffing. So I think one more phone call was made. And that's where the back channel was used. Thank God for the back channel. The back channel saved our ass during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I think it saved our ass now because still we don't believe him. Anatoly Antonov said things before. We just say, well, he's the ambassador taking instructions, bluffing. The Russian ambassador to the United Nations has said things before, just bluffing. Putin, just bluffing. Somebody made a phone call on Friday that said, we're not bluffing. And the phone call contained enough substance to convince the receiver that they weren't bluffing. Was this at the Pentagon level? Was this done at the CIA? I don't know. What I do know is there's somebody right now in the American media that knows this. But why aren't they saying this? This is information we, the people, we need to know now. We need to know why Biden backed down. We need to know that Biden was shown evidence that said Russia will go to war against the United States if you do this. Why do we need to know that? So we understand the consequences the next time loudmouth and Zelensky starts begging for permission to use long-range missiles. We, the people that don't want to die, need to shout down, don't listen to him, get rid of him, disregard him. We're not going to die for Ukraine. We are not willing to die for Ukraine. I'm not putting my family's lives on the line for Ukraine. That isn't going to happen. The story will come out. Mark my words, sometime in December, January, before whoever got elected gets sworn in, if we're still alive then, somebody will release, what happened, the inside story of how Biden backed down, blah, 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 blah. But by then it won't matter. Now it matters. Right now it matters. We need to know this. Why did the president change his mind? We need to know that the Russians aren't bluffing. We need to know this so that all the pundits on American TV can be put on notice. Stop selling my death. I don't want to die. Not for Ukraine. Not for Zelensky. Not for this insanity that's going on in Europe today. And I hope everybody who's watching the show reaches the same conclusion. I don't want to die. You shouldn't want to die. Your family shouldn't have to die because of the stupidity of the West's approach to Ukraine. No matter where you stand on how this conflict started, I believe that Russia's on the right side of history, but you can say that Russia's not on the right side of history. What you have to understand is that Russia isn't losing this war. They're not going to. I mean, Olaf Scholz got that signal from the head of Kazakhstan, who said Russia is militarily invincible right now. You're not going to beat them. But let's just break this down even further. Russia's a nuclear power. Its nuclear doctrine is built upon the premise that if the existential survival of Russia is put at risk, Russia will use its nuclear power to preserve and protect Russian survival. So your policy says, well, we're going to defeat Russia strategically. What part of Russia will use nuclear weapons to ensure that doesn't happen are you not understanding? So anybody who's sitting here saying that we're going to use Ukraine as a proxy conflict to bring about the strategic defeat of Russia is stupid, frankly speaking. And if they're responsible, Russia's bluffing. No, they're not. Biden just realized that. They're not bluffing. This is as real as it gets. This threat is real. It's existential in nature. Russia doesn't pose a threat to NATO. Russia's not going to invade NATO. Again, just think about this. How many troops has Russia had to put into the effort to recapture the Donbass, and how slow is that going? How difficult is it for Russia to assemble the forces necessary to recapture Kursk? And how slow is that going? These are hundreds of thousands of troops. Russia just enlarged its military. Putin signed off on it to about 1.5 million, an additional 600,000 troops. Why? Well, because Russia says there are threats, growing threats around our border that we need to have the troops to deal with defensively. Russia's not an offensive inclined power. They don't have the 12 million men needed to do large-scale offensive operations against Europe. So all this nonsense about Russia will follow up its victory in Ukraine by going into Romania, no, it's not. No, it's not. They don't have the military capacity to do this. Now, if Russia is attacked, Russia has the capacity to defend, and their defense is active in nature, which means they will take the fight to you. But that's a fight that you started, not Russia. Russia's not organized to initiate offensive military operations against NATO, and politically they're not inclined to do so. So we need to stop this nonsense about, we have to hold on to Ukraine to defend Europe. If we don't fight them there, we're going to have to fight them here. That's a lie, a straight up lie. A straight up lie. So again, it's sad what's happening to Ukraine. I agree. But I believe it's Ukraine's fault and the West's fault for promoting this fight, to begin this fight. Didn't have to have a coup in 2014, didn't have to disregard Minsk, didn't have to ignore the Russian efforts in December 2021 for a new peace framework. You didn't have to do any of the things that we did. We didn't have to get in the way of the peace proposal that was ready to be implemented on April 1st, 2022. There are so many things we didn't have to do, but we did it, and we've lost. It's a failure. We're not going to win this war. It's done. There are 100,000 of more Ukrainians are going to die the longer this goes. You might kill a couple, maybe 100,000 more Russians. Yay. But you didn't win. Russia's not defeated. Ukraine will lose. That's the ultimate outcome. It's going to happen. Be adults about it. Accept a defeat and figure out how do we mitigate the consequences of this defeat to pursue a policy that doesn't result in nuclear war. And you can only do that by beginning to have negotiations with the Russians. So now we come back to there's a wonderful op-ed written by RFK Jr. and Donald Trump Jr. Now people can say whatever they want about that. That you're missing the point. If your response is, well, that's RFK, he's a vaccine guy, or he's this, or he's that, he's pro-Israel, you're missing the point. That just shows how stupid you are. I apologize for calling people stupid, but at this point, I almost died this past weekend because of your stupidity, so I don't care. You're stupid. Really. And if that's Donald Trump Jr., he's the son, he's crazy, he's this, you're missing the point. What's the one thing that RFK Jr. and Donald Trump Jr. can do that you can't do? Talk to Donald Trump. You see, because ultimately it's
Ladies and gentlemen, very warm welcome.